Could you tell me about the amount of vitamin C that's excreted?
You know, there are a lot of statements made about vitamin C that just aren't true. Doctors are apt to make these statements that if you take more than a gram a day of vitamin C, it'll kill you, and, just nonsense. Or that vitamin C will cause you to have kidney stones. This just isn't true, that large doses of vitamin C cause you to have kidney stones. And I remember 20 years ago or more, I read that the authorities say that it doesn't make good sense to take large doses of vitamin C because all of the excess, over about 100 or 200 milligrams, is immediately excreted in the urine. So you're just wasting your money. I decided that I should check that. I was taking 10 grams a day. I collected my urine for 24 hours and analyzed it for vitamin C, and I found I was losing about 1.5 grams in the urine. So the other 85% of it, 8.5 grams, was being put to presumably good use in my body. Even this 1.5 grams had value, of course, because it protected the urinary tract against infections. It's a way women often get bladder infections. Vitamin C in large doses will protect them, cure the bladder infections. Also helps prevent cancer of the bladder, cancer of the urinary tract. So there are a lot of statements made about the vitamins that just aren't true. I don't understand why the medical profession and the old-fashioned nutritionists, which means most of the people that are talking, that are authorities on nutrition now, continue to say you should search for vegetables and fruits and foods that contain large amounts of vitamins because to have an increased intake of vitamins improves your health. But don't take vitamin supplements. This just seems to me to be silly. Here, when discoveries are made, for the most part, people as a whole are glad to have them. When the first railroads were built, people in London didn't say, well, God didn't intend us to go to Manchester on a railroad train, so we'd better go by the horse and coach, taking 4 days and sleeping overnight to get to Manchester. They were glad to have the railroads to get there in a day. And similarly, when electric lights came in, we were glad. People didn't say, God didn't intend us to have electric lights. He wants us just to burn wax candles or something like that. But when vitamins were discovered, for some reason, when the vitamins became available at low prices, for some reasons these medical and nutritional authorities have failed to accept the idea that this was really a great discovery that the chemists were making around 60, 80, 100 years ago, that these substances exist, that we know how to make them or concentrate them from natural sources and make them available in tablets or as pure crystalline substances at a low price. I can't understand this, why they rejected this great discovery and continued to reject it by saying, be sure that you get certain amounts of each of the 4 foods so that you get enough vitamin C to keep you alive and enough vitamin A to keep you alive and so on. But don't take vitamin supplements, and especially don't take them in the tremendous amounts that fellow Linus Pauling recommends. I just don't understand it.
You said, if I can just take it back to, you said that a goat, something of your own body weight, like a goat, produces vitamin C themselves. But is there any proof that a goat lives longer because it does produce the vitamin C?
I didn't hear.
Oh, right. You said that a goat, for example, produces vitamin C. Is there any proof that a goat lives longer because it does produce vitamin C?
Well, I think I can say, I mentioned that a goat the size of a man manufactures approximately the amount of vitamin C every day that I take, 200 or 300 times the amount that the Food and Nutrition Board recommends for human beings. And I think that the goat isn't enough different from human beings. The goat and the cow and the horse and the cat and the rat and the dog and so on, all of them manufacture these very large amounts of vitamin C. Why does the goat make only the amount that it makes? Why not make half that amount, which would still be 100 or 150 times the amount that human beings get, and save all of the energy and materials that it is expending in making this large amount? And why do goats continue to make these large amounts and all these other animals generation after generation, unless this large amount of vitamin C improves their health? There's no doubt that the reason that the goat and all of the other animals make these very large amounts of vitamin C is that large amounts of vitamin C are good for the health. So I accept that. That's one of the reasons that I'm taking the amount of vitamin C that I do take.
Could I ask you about, just change the subject slightly, about the use of vitamins in intelligence, as well as just your body, how they can affect and improve your mind?
Well, the brain is a remarkable organ. It's hard to believe that human beings are able to think the way that they do think, that they're conscious of their own existence and are interested in what the world was like 1,000 years or 10,000 years or 1,000,000 years ago, and that they talk about the future of the world and so on. Other animals don't do that. The brain cannot function unless there are certain important substances present in the brain. And one of these substances is vitamin C. A person who dies of scurvy will still have a good bit of vitamin C in his brain because this process of thinking is so important that we have developed methods of pumping vitamin C from the blood into the brain, even when a person is suffering from a deficiency in vitamin C. A person with scurvy will die, of infectious disease, because vitamin C is a part of the process of protection against diseases. And if you are suffering from scurvy because of not getting enough vitamin C, you have a tendency to succumb to some infection that you'd be able to overcome otherwise, or from internal bleeding, because vitamin C is needed to strengthen the blood vessels, and when you have a deficiency, the blood vessels just break open, rupture. They're not strong enough to resist the blood pressure. And still, these pumps work to pump vitamin C into the brain. So, since vitamin C is obviously required for the functioning of the brain, there's a possibility that an increased intake of vitamin C would improve the functioning of the brain. I remember 20 years ago when a couple of psychologists carried out a very interesting study in Texas with school children, several hundred school children. They measured the amount of vitamin C in their blood. And half of these school children had rather small amounts, less than 1 milligram per deciliter. The other half had more, between 1 and 1.5 milligrams per deciliter. Then they measured their IQ. And there was a 5-point difference in IQ between the high vitamin C and the low. The high ones were at 105, and the low ones average 100. Then they gave all of them some extra vitamin C, 90 milligrams of vitamin C a day for the school year or term. And at the end of that time, they took blood samples and measured the vitamin C. The high ones hadn't changed. They still were in this range, 1 to 1.5. The low ones had moved up into that range. There's a physiological process that takes the vitamin C out of the blood if you get more than about 1.5 milligrams and sends it to the brain or other parts of the body. So they measured the IQ. The high ones hadn't changed. They were still at 105. The low ones had gone from 100 to 104, I think, not quite average, 105. So then summer vacation came. The students went home. You know, the difference here between these two groups of children, the psychologists tried to find the difference, the income of the family, the education of the parents, or things of that sort. There was no statistically significant difference in these quantities. But probably it was the ideas that the mother had about food that was the difference. In the one family, perhaps the children were getting orange juice or other and ate more fruits and vegetables, and in the other, the mother didn't provide these foods for the children. That may have been the reason that they, at any rate, at the end of the summer, the low ones were low again. During the summer, they weren't getting the extra vitamin C, and the level in the blood had gone down. And when they measured their IQ, it had gone down. And then they got the vitamin C again for some months, and they were up equal to, or approximately equal to, the high vitamin C group. Their vitamin C went up and their IQ. These investigators said they thought that having this extra vitamin C, not very much, 90 milligrams a day, this extra vitamin C increased their alertness and awareness, that made them a little more lively in their thinking, and that was the reason that they did better on the IQ tests. Well, there have been a number of studies of this sort, and of course this is a complicated matter. It isn't easy to carry out these studies. From my analysis of the various studies, I have reached the conclusion that in general there is an improvement, not a tremendous improvement, but an improvement in the apparent intelligence or results of the IQ tests of children if they are given some extra vitamin C per day. There's a little evidence that some of the other vitamins and minerals also, if added as supplements in the recommended amounts, have some effect of this sort.
Is there going? What do you think the maximum attainable human lifespan is? And is there going to be a leap, a quantum leap, to extend that? And if there is, how will that happen?
Well, there's a distribution curve on longevity, so that people who have reached the age of 90, only a small fraction, I'm not sure what it is, reach that age, and they have perhaps 5 years average life expectancy. When they reach, and some of them, a quarter of them perhaps will reach the age of 100 or less than a quarter, and they have 3 or 4 years life expectancy. The maximum survival time there's some uncertainty about it. There are stories of people living to be 150 or more, but the maximum survival time is believed now to be about 115 years. Now, I think that vitamin C can increase the average survival time by 25 years, from 75 to 100. So I would say the tail end of the distribution curve will also be shoved over by 25 years, and instead of living to be 115, that is a single person in the world's population, or the Western world, living to be 115, there will be a single person out of the 1,000 million people, say, living to be 140 years old. So that's my estimate as to the maximum survival time for human beings in the future if they all begin improving their health by taking supplementary vitamin C.
Do you think does any of your work here indicate that maybe genetically, by altering the DNA, could we live beyond the 140 possibly in the future?
Well, of course, there is a possibility that the DNA can be altered in such a way as to increase life expectancy somewhat. This means introducing an altered gene in place of a gene that's present that limits life expectancy to some extent now, or just deleting a damaging gene, removing it. Now, there are perhaps 100,000 genes in an individual's complement of DNA. That was my estimate 50 years ago, and it's the estimate that most people, most geneticists, most people working in this field make at the present time. 100,000 genes. It would be a big job to change one gene in the whole human population, or even in an individual, a big job. And if that has just an improvement of 1 in 100,000, that you may need to change 1,000 genes in order to get a really significant effect on longevity. So I'm not very optimistic about that method of increasing life expectancy. But there is a possibility that something significant can be done. My associate, Dr. Fleming, has been working on this Denham-Harman idea about free radicals by introducing a gene into a laboratory animal, in his case, the housefly, in order to see whether the gene that's introduced will have the effect of destroying free radicals faster and increasing life expectancy. Well, this, of course, is closely related to what I suggest, that you take more vitamin C in order to destroy the free radicals, more vitamin E in order to destroy the free radicals.
What about dietary restriction? Is there a theory that if you cut down the amount of food you ate, that you would live longer, because in laboratory mice, dietary restriction extends lifespan?
Well, there is some evidence that in animals, the rat especially, cutting down on the intake of food increases the length of life. In humans, we know that people who eat too much and become obese live a shorter length of time than people who have the average weight or even somewhat less than the average weight. So that just the amount of food that's eaten can determine, for some people at any rate, life expectancy. Also, there's one food that is a modern food and that is taken in large amounts and is quite harmful. This is ordinary sugar. 200 years ago, very few people could get sugar. It was very expensive. Our ancestors of 1,000 or 2,000 or 5,000 years ago didn't get very much sugar. They got a little from sweet fruits, but very little compared with the amount that people eat now. The average intake of sugar in the United States, sucrose, ordinary white sugar or brown sugar, it doesn't make any difference. It's all sugar. The ordinary person in the United States, the average person, eats 100 pounds of sugar a year. The average person in Britain eats 120 pounds of sugar per year. There's no doubt that sugar is harmful. I recommend, in my writings, I say, cut down your sugar intake to half or even less than half of the average amount. Don't add sugar to tea or coffee, and don't eat sweet desserts except occasionally. Don't eat sweet desserts regularly, and that will improve your health and increase the length of your life. So there are two ways. Don't eat so much that you become obese. Keep your weight down, and cut down on your sugar intake. I myself have since I was 40 years old, eaten a rather smaller amount of protein than most people eat. I'm not a vegetarian I'm not an ovo-lacto vegetarian. I eat eggs and milk quite a bit, eggs and milk, but I also eat meat occasionally, but I don't eat a large amount of meat. My protein intake is not much more than the amount that I need to replenish the proteins in my body. In my case, that's 40 grams a day, about 1.5 ounces of protein a day. Most people eat 2 or 3 times or 4 times that amount of protein. So it is possible to improve one's health by dietary methods. I don't recommend going on crash diets to get thin, and then when you're off the diet, eating a lot so you then become fat again. There's evidence that this zigzag method of controlling the weight is really harmful. You have to limit your intake of food. If you have a tendency to obesity, you have to keep your intake of food down in a steady manner, day after day after day.
Great type, Barry. Could I ask you, sir, to tell us how old you are and how long do you hope to live?
You know, I was born in Portland, Oregon, and then moved to a small town in eastern Oregon, Condon, Oregon, population about 500 then and population about 500 now. And I was born on the 28th of February, 1901. So now, in 1991, I'm 90 years old. I can't predict how long I'm going to live. I'm in pretty good shape with respect to my general health. Nothing to complain about. I'm not so steady on my pins as I used to be. I don't run very much. I avoid running. And I suppose my muscular strength is decreased with passage of time. But I don't have any disease at the present time. The statistics suggest that if I'm an average person, I'd live 5 years longer. I don't think I'm an average person because I eat I take so much more vitamin C and other vitamins than the average person takes. So I would say I have a probable life expectancy of 10 years now, but if I'm far enough out on this distribution curve, I may well live even longer than that.
Thank you very much. Excellent. Thank you very much. Kat?
That was a piece of equipment that it is, has the ability to convert vitamin C into other chemicals that the body may require and is not getting an adequate supply. Is there any truth to that?
Oh, yes. Yes, there is.
Well, I'll ask the question then because of my arm, yeah?
Yeah, I'm rolling.
Could you tell me how vitamin C also makes other nutrients and vitamins?
Well, I mentioned that 20 years ago I measured the amount of vitamin C that I was excreting in my urine when I was taking 10 grams a day, and I was losing only 1.5 grams in my urine. Well, I was taking this 10 grams by mouth. Some of it didn't get into the bloodstream but stayed in the intestinal contents, and it wasn't really wasted. It was protecting my lower bowel against cancer of the colon and rectum, so it wasn't wasted. And I'm not sure how much, about half of what I ingested, or perhaps 60%, got into the bloodstream. But only 1.5 grams was eliminated in the urine. So I thought, what happens to the rest of it? It must be changed into certain oxidation products of vitamin C. In fact, we got evidence 18 years ago, that if you take large doses of vitamin C, the body responds by developing a procedure for converting the vitamin C into these other substances, a procedure that it didn't have operating before because there wasn't enough vitamin C being ingested in the food to allow any of it to be converted into other substances. So we have for 18 years been studying in our institute the value of these other substances that you get in your body if you take a large amount of vitamin C regularly, but don't get in the body if you don't. One thing that's been found is that these substances are more effective against protecting the body against cancer, which is what we've been studying, than vitamin C itself. So one reason for taking large doses of vitamin C is that the body responds by converting some of the vitamin C, a large part of it in fact, into other substances that are valuable for the health.
Go tighter. Could you define what these other substances are?
Well, I could...
very briefly.
You know, I'm a chemist. There are about 10 million chemical substances that have been described in the scientific literature, and I know the names of a lot of them, and I could give chemical names. But we do know that these substances are oxidation products of vitamin C. They are similar to vitamin C, but not exactly the same. They've had some more oxygen atoms added. There hasn't been enough work carried out as yet to permit me to say what the mode of the mechanism of action of these other substances in improving the health of human beings is. We've carried out some studies to check what these other substances do, but to determine the molecular mechanisms is a hard job that we haven't succeeded in tackling successfully as yet.
Okay, lovely cut. It was excellent. Thank you very much, sir.
That's great. Okay.
Right.
Super.
If we
Great
could,
interview.
right, it was very, very good. I wonder if we could put you at your desk now,
Surely.
and I'll take the mic off, and just as if